episode of the High-Octane Truth. I'm Peter DiLorenzo, and I have a special guest today. Eric, tell everyone who you are and your background real quick.
Eric Tritko. I've been running the blog of rumblestrip.net since middle of 2001, covered motorsports and also review cars these days, and also as a day job, I'm the director of content and social media for a small agency.
That's great. And, I think people are familiar with me through previous video appearances. And we look forward to doing this on a weekly basis. This is a test session today, but AutoextremistTV has been, this is its 16th year since June 1st of '99. I think most people are familiar with what I do, what we do here. Editorial commentary about the business, the people, the products, the personalities, the marketing, the advertising, plus a motorsports column called Fumes. Topics of the moment is on the table, and the line is sort of an adjunct to Fumes with pictures and specifics from with racing news of the moment. So Eric, what should we talk about today in this test? I think obviously there's a lot to talk about, but let's give it a whirl for this first test session.
Well, there's the two main topics I think that are dominating the news would either be Volkswagen and that drama, and please don't call it a gate since it doesn't involve a hotel in Washington.
Yeah, I've never called it a gate and never will.
Right. And the other one is the FCA UAW negotiations and the implications that's going to have going forward, not just for Chrysler, but for Ford and for General Motors as well.
Yeah, it's very impactful, needless to say. FCA made hay in the last 6 years with a very favorable contract that Sergio Marchionne had his labor force dramatically cheaper than Ford and General Motors. The new contract is much closer. It sets some new standards that Ford and GM will have to address. But I think Sergio really has tipped his hand with this deal. I don't believe for a moment that FCA can survive. They lack future advanced technologies. They don't have any access to it. They need a partner. It's going to have to come soon, certainly before the next downturn, because if it doesn't, I think FCA will be looking at someone coming along and buying them piecemeal, like writing a check for Jeep and the Jeep plant for $6 billion, and then writing a check for maybe the Ram trucks and maybe even the new minivan plant separately. But it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out with the negotiations going forward with GM and Ford. What do you think?
No, agreed. I mean, one of the things that Chrysler's been able to do these last couple of years is really to buy market share by offering huge money on the hoods.
Huge, yeah. Huge.
Yeah, I mean, like $5,000 and $10,000 on trucks, incentives to dealers so that you could lease essentially a $40,000 to $45,000 pickup truck for $130 to $160 a month. I mean, that's really unheard of. Even some of the 200 leases have been pretty cheap as well as they tried to buy that market share. So yeah, the increase in costs are going to be interesting, and we'll actually see how competitive the products can be without that money on the hood. Now, the Ram truck itself, it's as good as anything on the market. I mean, you can argue Ford and Chevy have advantage in certain areas, but it's 100% competitive in that market. Some of their other stuff, there was a lot of praise for the 200, but my experience with it was pretty middle, mid-range.
I think I said way back when it came out, and all the haters came out for me, but I said, the only thing it does is it allows FCA to be represented in that segment.
Yep.
Is it a world beater? No.
No.
The advertising is terrible. It just allows them to compete. The trucks are great, and the Jeep franchise is impeccable.
Yep.
The brand image second only to Porsche, in my estimation, in the grand scheme of brand images in this business. But the other thing we should have pointed out is FCA made hay by financing people who normally wouldn't make the cut at Ford and GM. I think this is a little known fact of their success, and that may in fact backfire on them going forward. They've certainly overloaded in that direction. But, you know, let's face it, it's a Jeep, truck, police car, and hot rod company. Yep. I mean, the Challenger and Charger are great and everything, but if you don't have any advanced technology coming, which FCA doesn't, you know, they simply can't make those cars pretty soon.
Right. Yeah, and minivans, you know, it's a nice niche. That's become a niche market now. So, I mean, you're going to sell 120,000 of those a year, maybe. Maybe.
I mean, the old days, yeah, Chrysler dominated, but now there's such good minivan competitors out there that, you know, people aren't just going to automatically say, oh, yeah, well, they're making one, so we're going to go back to that. I mean, they're happy with their Toyotas and Hondas, and, you know, even Kia has made huge strides, and so it's a different game now. So yeah. Sergio's operating on a very thin margin.
And until a month ago, I would have said, well, one of the big candidates, even though Sergio wanted to buy VW at one point, right? And, and now I think well, up till a month ago, I said the shoe's on the other foot. I said there would have been three good candidates: Volkswagen, Honda, and then Hyundai, Kia, because all three of those in some ways need what Chrysler has: Jeep trucks, at least for the American market, you know,
right.
Jeep trucks being the primary thing. But you know, Volkswagen's off the table, obviously. Honda, I don't know. That would be Honda and Kia both. That would be a very interesting mix of cultures, way more so than when the Germans were involved.
Yeah, it's interesting. Honda and Kia, I mean, they plateaued, but I actually think Kia has more momentum in the market. I mean, their designs are really coming together, and you know, they've actually gone and hired some engineers from BMW to make their cars feel like they should for the first time. So they're definitely, I expect them to start an upward trajectory again. And maybe Kia might even be stronger than Hyundai, the way they're going. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. Sergio does have to make a deal. He cannot survive. If there's another downturn, it's going to be really ugly really quickly for FCA.
Yeah. One thing that sounded good originally when all this started, was that the combination of hourly and salary healthcare and getting all the big three together, that sounded like a really good idea for everyone. And that was left out completely, which I think it'll be interesting to see if Ford and GM tried to have some talks, you know, on the side and say, well, they didn't do it. That doesn't mean we can't try to figure something out. So,
right.
Because everyone knows that healthcare is going up, even with the Obamacare, it's still going up 10-12% a year. Because my wife, who works for one of the big 2.5, they just got their increase, and it was about 11%. So,
yeah. You know, a couple of weeks ago when the Volkswagen thing really hit, and by the way, they just announced that there's another glitch on the 2016 diesels that they currently aren't allowed to sell. They sort of, I don't know if it was, oh, we forgot to mention this one. But, you know, until this happened, I don't think people, unless you've been over there, I don't think you realize that what the German auto manufacturers mean to Germany Inc. I mean, it's everything. It's a source of pride. And this Volkswagen thing is a huge black eye for the whole industry and for the country, because they take great pride in the fact that they believe that the German manufacturers build the finest cars in the world. And in a lot of cases, they do. So the interesting thing is I expect the Germans, all of them, and indications are they're doing exactly this. They're doubling down on what they do best, and that's develop advanced technology and bring it to the consumers like other manufacturers can't. And so, although I was a bit dismayed to hear that Volkswagen's going to bring, excuse me, an electric Phaeton out, I'm not sure that would be high on my list of things to bring out. But Porsche showed the super electric Porsche in Frankfurt. Audi showed the crossover, which is probably even more significant because that's the one that's a bread and butter segment that could do well. I think the Germans are going to, again, double down on what they do best. They're going to push the envelope of technology, and they're desperate to reestablish in their minds, superiority in the business. So it should be very interesting to see.
Well, I mean, that Audi is definitely a shot across the bow at Elon, and that's a whole different conversation. But even what they've done so far, like with the e-Golf, if you don't know that it's an electric car, which is, I guess, both good and bad. But the one thing they did, which was pretty impressive, although I haven't had any time in the car, but talking with enough people who have, is from the interior packaging, there is no difference in interior room between the electric and a normal one, which, given all the batteries that are in there, that's pretty significant, because you look at any other, whether it's a Leaf, a Volt, or whatever, or anything that's halfway done, there's usually a pretty big intrusion with all those battery packs. So, and that's on the low end. Imagine what they can do with something where they have some margin.
Yeah, and they've already announced that they've done a parallel architecture program, this modular architecture program for electric vehicles, and they're way down the road with that. So it's going to be very interesting in the coming years when this new product really starts to hit. I mean, that Porsche at Frankfurt was just spectacular. So I don't doubt, and as you said, and that's the key thing to remember here, at the margins they're operating in, they're going to be able to bring some extremely impressive vehicles to consumers.
Yep, absolutely. And obviously they've learned a lot with having brought the 918 into production, and with the 919 race car, and then they even did years ago with the 911 with that hybrid 911 race car they did with the
flywheel.
With the flywheel, yeah. So
I believe that was Williams Engineering who worked with them on that.
That was some cool engineering on that. I wish they could have gone somewhere with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recall which driver it was. I don't know whether it was Patrick Long or somebody. They admitted to sort of thinking about the energy sitting next to them in the cockpit and hoping that it all worked without blowing up. So,
yeah.
Let's talk about racing. It's hard to not talk about NASCAR. I mean, let's face it, it's in terms of mainstream media attention, there's no other racing that touches it. Not Formula One, not IndyCar. It is what it is.
Yeah, not in this country.
Yeah, not in this country.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't know if it was something that happened a couple of years ago, but I used to watch NASCAR. I may not be a fan, but hey, it was racing. I'd watch it. And now if I watch 3 minutes of highlights and read the rundown, whether it's on AutoExtremist or one of the other sites, that's my exposure to NASCAR. And it's in some ways sad because that's how little interest it has. And we're in the middle of the chase.
Yeah.
The thing that caught my interest more is that Tony Stewart said that next year will be his last year.
Yeah, that was huge news. Not unexpected,
no,
but still significant. I mean, I've always I am considered NASCAR's biggest critic by far anywhere in the world, and I've been, relentless at them. But I've always made a distinction between the powers that be that make the decisions at NASCAR and the drivers and teams and crews. I mean, they've got some of the most talented people in the racing business globally in the NASCAR garage now. They have technicians with Formula One experience, aerodynamicists. I mean, they've got some of the best people in the world. And so I always have to qualify my criticism of NASCAR by saying the demarcation is when you get to the garage, because I think some of the driving talent in NASCAR is just spectacular. And it's too bad. I think I've pounded on this relentlessly. They need to trim the schedule. I mean, even their champion last year, Kevin Harvick, who I have a tremendous respect for, said, look, we have too many races. We go to the same tracks twice. I mean, we don't need to be doing that.
Right.
And the oversaturation of NASCAR is something they absolutely refuse to deal with, because their perspective at Daytona Beach is we have long-standing agreements with tracks, well, at least the tracks that International Speedway Corporation doesn't own and Speedway Motorsports doesn't own. But it's too bad. Yeah, the cookie cutter tracks. I mean, besides cutting the schedule, they need a road race in the chase. They need to delete some of the 1.5 mile speedways in the chase because it's just monotonous. Last week at Charlotte, they knew this was going to happen, but nobody could pass anybody, and it's frustrating, because if you like racing and you're a racing enthusiast, it's slim pickings right now. Yeah, it's my favorite, MotoGP, and then it's Formula One. IndyCar season is over, prematurely. And so here's NASCAR. So why aren't they my favorite NASCAR racing is road racing. Why aren't they at a road race track in the chase? I don't know. Because frankly, I wouldn't go to Talladega in the chase. It's too much of a crapshoot.
Right.
And it's too impactful on the standings. And I just think leave that track out of the chase. It's just.
Like you say, Watkins Glen is usually one of the best races of the year.
Yeah.
Sears Point, it's a tight track, but still can be pretty good. And, and if you want to know what Road Atlanta in the middle of the chase would look like, the Bathurst 1000 was this past weekend, and after 6 hours and 1,000 kilometers, it was, a 3 or 4 second margin of victory, but everything was so close. Plus you throw in a little weather in there, a little, had to run on some rain tires for a bit. I mean, that's what it could be. I had the schedule. I had the chase schedule. I mean, I have Road America and Road Atlanta in the final 10 races, and there's no reason in the world they couldn't have two new road racing tracks in the chase. And I wonder, well, now that I was thinking that would be a really interesting schedule if you ran it on like Labor Day, would be to combine like Petite and the chase, where Petite was mostly, rather than having the Busch or whatever Nationwide series, you have Petite on Saturday and then NASCAR on Sunday.
Well, the only problem, I think another thing that the powers that be at NASCAR have really messed up is they've abandoned some of their traditional dates. Now this year they brought back Darlington to Labor Day, which I think was hugely important for them. And to their credit, they did a great job at it. I mean, everyone bought into it and they did a fabulous job. But I could see something like that. That would be an intriguing weekend. I think Road Atlanta and Petite in September with the NASCAR chase race on Sunday would be great, followed by, going up to Road America, where they've already run nationwide races there, and everyone just is over the moon about it who's run there. Mm-hmm. And I know that NASCAR is dabbling and considering Road America, and it's the one road race that comes up when they talk about adding another road race to the schedule.
And the other one is a wild card in there too, because they already run trucks up there, would be Mosport.
Right.
I'm fortunate enough to announce at Mosport every year for their National Superbike Series. and talk to the people and the track owner up there. And like when the trucks come up there, I mean, that's a third or fourth tier NASCAR series, and it's still a huge draw. So, and Mosport is another great historic natural road course that certainly has a lot of places which would be great for overtaking.
Yeah, let's face it, the premier road racing circuits in North America are Road America and Mosport, and followed by, to me, Watkins Glen and Road Atlanta, and you know, we go down from there. Believe it or not, Laguna's never been one of my favorites.
It's too tight.
When they altered the track to attract the MotoGP boys, they lost something there. I mean, just fundamentally lost something. I don't think people realize what turn one used to be at Laguna. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So that's one thing about Mosport and Road America is, you know, and Road America in particular has not been altered since it was built in 1955. Yes, they have a chicane for the kink for the bikes, but still the main track has not been altered, which is impressive.
I was fortunate enough for an event last weekend I was at. Bobby Rahal spoke. We had dinner at his Garage Mahal at Autobahn, which again, that's a whole separate thing. But he went on and on and on when asked about how Elkhart Lake, obviously growing up in the Chicago area too, but Elkhart Lake, Road America, favorite track. If he had to pick one track he ever wanted to race on or whatever, that was it. I mean, he loved it so much that he had a slot car replica built, and it's by the person who builds those real high-end slot car replicas. Yeah, and I got to say that's an amazing thing. But yeah, that's how much he loves that track and what he thinks of it as the premier road course.
Well, there's one other person who considers it one of his all-time favorites, and that's Mario Andretti. He has always said Road America's in the top 3 tracks in the world for road racing, which, you know, I dubbed it America's National Park of Speed, and I encourage Road America to use that theme, and they do, which I'm happy about, because now it's become sort of a catchphrase for the track, which I think is cool. But you know, it is like going to a state park, and and there's some traditions there that are just invaluable. And there's traditions at Watkins Glen. I mean, the town of Watkins Glen. I mean, there's stuff that NASCAR needs to be mindful of. And, you know, they're afraid about disrupting their thing. I mean, they're not really into change. But I think their drivers are ready for it. And the teams are ready for it. They're all ready for considering a reduced schedule. I did a schedule that had 30 races total, including the special events. And it also had 2 more road races in the schedule. But clearly, it was dropping second races at several tracks to make it work. But, you know, I just think they have to consider it. And they have to understand that they're oversaturated. It's hard to believe, but when you see the empty seats, when you see empty seats in Charlotte, which is the center of the universe for 90% of the teams down there and their families, that's just not good.
That's a whole lot of not good, right?
So what about MotoGP? How do you think the season's going to shake out? You're much more up to speed on the bike thing, but I certainly appreciate what these guys do. It's just incredible to watch them perform. Yeah. And it's the last, I don't know, it's just hanging it out, literally racing left. So
as a tagline for a friend of mine who runs one of the best MotoGP sites, which is motomatters.com, his tagline is it's still about the rider. Right. So we're in so many times where if your car isn't perfect, whether it's set up or whatever, or it's more about the engineer setting up your car and telling you how to drive it. Yes, there's a lot of that in MotoGP, but at the end of the day, it's still the rider making the biggest difference. And then you get to see physically what they do on the bike versus being in a car, right? So that's to me has always been the attraction of motorcycle racing. And yeah, they were just at Motegi this past weekend, and you know, started out it was wet and then and dried up, and it was all about tire management. And it was interesting that Danny Pedrosa, who normally is at a big disadvantage because of his weight, actually was advantaged because he wasn't burning up his tires so much because of his weight. And he was able to make a charge through about halfway through the race. And you look at the pictures of the tires, especially Jorge's, he tried to go hard up front and burned up his tires and then was complaining about it. And, you know, he's a multiple-time world champion, but he whines too much. So
yeah, well, when you see the reality of the contact patch that they're using to negotiate the circuits they run on, it's just incredible. It really is.
Take a credit card out of your wallet. That's about your back tire contact patch. Cut that in half. That's your front contact patch. You know, and they're putting 260 to 270 horsepower through that back contact patch.
It's just amazing.
The level of electronics is absolutely amazing on those bikes, and the level of sophistication is, you know, okay, it's not Formula One, but it's not far. It's, you know, world endurance levels of electronics involved in that. So
yeah, and that that's interesting. I mean, the 24-hour Le Mans, the fact that they embrace this technology for the prototypes is commendable. I think it's really cool. And Formula One, I think it's too formulaic. You know, every race is the same. I know that's what they like. I mean, every drill, everything they do. Now they're talking about, well, maybe we can change it up. And I mean, they're almost as resistant to change as Daytona Beach is. So Formula One is, you know, always dependent on who has the best car.
Right.
I think in the 60s, the drivers were able to literally take a car by the scruff of the neck and will it to win, some of the great ones. But now you're so dependent on the technology. It just, you know, it's too sanitized for me. I mean, I think Lewis Hamilton could win in any era.
Right.
And any of the other top guys, they certainly could.
And that's always been my thing about Formula One, especially in the last maybe even 15 years, is look, when a driver leaves a good team, whether it was Felipe Massa, it was Lewis Hamilton, it was Alonso. I mean, you know, they go to a team that's maybe not quite as good, and all of a sudden they go from a top 5 driver to running in, you know, 10th to 15th. Well, their talent didn't go away, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you know, and when you have to spend $2 million developing your car in between each race, you know, it gets a little.
And, you know, over here, Major League Sports Car Racing is now controlled by Jim France, and he bought out Don Panos in the old American Le Mans series. And, you know, on the one hand, it's fabulous for people who like road racing that there's a patron who's willing to invest his time and money to keep the series going. On the other hand, I mean, this dance with the ACO and the prototypes, you know, the American prototypes are sort of okay. And come 2017, they will be allowed at Le Mans in P2. And I think when you see the level of competition in GTLM, which I think is the greatest road racing in the world in terms of cars right now, when you see the level of that competition and you could envision a grid of 40 cars in a national GT series, I just think that IMSA's missing something. I mean, pretend prototypes aren't the answer. I mean, they're going to have spec engines in P2, and then the new Daytona prototype international with a small I, by the way. You know, yes, they say they're going to have manufacturer body work on them, and they're going to be allowed different engines and all that, but I don't know. I can't get excited about it. Not when you watch GTLM and realize what a great series that could be.
My fear has been since day one, and some of it, and you've talked about it and you've written about it a lot, is that with the Daytona group running road racing car road racing, the same thing's going to happen. What happened with motorcycle road racing? It's going to interest them for 3 or 4 years. They'll I don't want to say that their intentions aren't good, because I think they are at some level, but they're so consumed with their king product, which is NASCAR, that they don't have either the time, the people, I hate to say the resources, because they've got the resources, but the time, the people, or the patience to nurture it. And it got to the point where they had to basically give away American motorcycle road racing, because essentially it was going to disappear, because the factory team, it was down to 5 or 6 races, and the factory team's like, look, this is pointless. Why are we doing this? And that was the birth of Moto America. And that got thrown together at the at the 11th hour last year. So
and how do you
I fear that for road racing.
How do you think the prospects for Moto America is?
Yeah.
How do you think the prospects for it?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
America. How do you think the prospects for Moto America? How do they look?
They certainly had issues in year one. But I think they were given the benefit of the doubt, given the main people who were behind it, which one is Wayne Rainey, who is multi-time MotoGP champion, very famous in motorcycle circles. Another gentleman is a guy who ran Kenny Roberts race teams for 15 years. And then they've got a money guy who seems to be, he's just the money guy. He's not going to get involved. The one good thing it seemed to be, from the feedback I got from people, was that they listened to the teams and the racers and how to improve the product, and things got better and better. Seemed to be after every race, or maybe took a race or two. They still have an issue with TV. I'd say TV coverage, but let's just say video coverage, whether that's online or on TV. They're on CBS Sports Network, which I think 10 people in the world get.
Right.
They need to do some live streaming, but that's a whole separate thing. But as a core series, I think they had a really solid first year. They're involved in this KTM 390 Cup, which is essentially young riders on spec bikes. And the American riders went over and ran a race in the UK with some other people in the world. And in one of the races, the American won. And then one of the other ones finished very well. So it shows good promise that we're going to be developing young talent again for future purpose. So fingers crossed, things look good. Year one looked good. Benefit of the doubt. Year two, though, there's not going to be so much, we're willing to give you. They want to start seeing results, but they already have most of their schedule out and published. They're trying to get a couple more dates. So again, they seem to be on the ball, and it's looking promising.
Well, that's good. I mean, I still hear persistent rumors that Jim France is going to buy out the Pirelli World Challenge. And, I don't have a problem with that if a premier GT series in North America was the end result.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned the V8 Supercar series. There's no reason in the world why the U.S. couldn't have it. And actually, the diversity of cars in in IMSA GTLM and Pirelli World Challenge would make a pretty appealing package, field of racers that people can look at. So, I don't know what's going to happen. I hope, I certainly hope for the best, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up this week, anything else we need to talk about?
I think those are the big items for what covers this past week or so.
All right. Again, this is Peter DiLorenzo, editor-in-chief of AutoextremistTV.com, with my guest Eric Tritko. And this is episode 1 of the High-Octane Truth. We hope to do many more in the coming weeks. We try to do 1 a week for the foreseeable future. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.